What if the perfume you have been spraying every morning is chemically identical to a fragrance costing $200? Not similar, but identical. Same fragrance house, same molecule, but different bottle, different price tag, different story sold to you before you even open the box. The perfume industry is built on one of the most successful illusions in retail history. And the 10 fragrances on this list have quietly been dismantling it for years. 10 perfumes under $25. The list starts where the illusion is the most expensive and the alternative is the most obvious. Number 10. Revlon Charlie Red. Charlie Red has been on the market since 1973. That is not a heritage claim. That is a performance record. A fragrance that survives 5 decades in a market that discards most launches within 2 seasons is not surviving on nostalgia. It is surviving because the formula works. Charlie Red opens with a citrus and aldehydic top note that the 1970s fragrance industry built entire luxury lines around. The kind of opening that made Chanel No. 5 a cultural object rather than simply a fragrance. The mid-notes move into a floral heart of rose and jasmine, with a warmth that the era's perfumers understood better than most contemporary mass-market formulators do. The base settles into a woody, musky dry-down, with genuine longevity. Not the synthetic musk that most accessible fragrances use to simulate longevity. A warm, textured base that develops on the skin across hours of wear. At $9 to $12 for a standard bottle, Charlie Red is producing a fragrance experience that the luxury aldehydic floral category charges $80 to $200 to approximate. That approximation does not always outperform what Charlie Red has been delivering since before most of its current competitors were formulated. Check the batch code before purchasing anywhere that is not a major pharmacy or grocery chain. Fragrance has a functional shelf life. Current batch within 3 years of manufacture ensures the top notes are performing as formulated, rather than having oxidized into something flatter and less nuanced than the original. The next fragrance on this list is the one that the fragrance community discovered online before most mainstream perfume reviewers acknowledged it existed. And the reason the community reacted the way it did was not the price. It was a specific aromatic molecule that this fragrance uses at a concentration most $25 perfumes never attempt. Number 9. Zara Gourmand Collection. Zara's fragrance range has a reputation problem that has nothing to do with the formulas. The reputation problem is the store. Most shoppers do not expect to find a seriously formulated fragrance sitting between a denim jacket display and a checkout queue. That expectation gap is the reason Zara's best perfumes remain some of the most underrated, accessible fragrances available in any retail channel at any price point. The Gourmand Addictive specifically uses a benzyl benzoate and ethyl maltol combination that the niche fragrance market charges $80 to $150 to deploy in similar concentrations in their gourmand category offerings. Ethyl maltol is the molecule responsible for the cotton candy, spun sugar warmth that the gourmand fragrance category is built around. At the concentration Gourmand Addictive uses, it produces a genuinely addictive skin scent that the fragrance community compares favorably to Mugler Angel, a fragrance retailing at over $100. That comparison is not wishful thinking from budget shoppers. It is the informed observation of fragrance enthusiasts who evaluate accords, molecules, and longevity rather than bottle design and brand heritage. The longevity at this price point is the specific detail that generates the most surprise from first-time wearers. 6 to 8 hours of genuine projection on most skin types, not the 2 to 3 hours of fading projection that most accessible fragrances deliver after the initial spray. At $12 to $22 for a full-size bottle, Zara Gourmand Addictive is doing something the accessible fragrance market rarely manages. Molecule-level performance at a price that has nothing to do with the molecule. If you have been dismissing Zara's fragrance section every time you walk through the store, subscribe now, because every week, this channel publishes exactly this kind of knowledge. the products that the beauty and fragrance industry has made invisible by surrounding them with assumptions about where quality is supposed to live. No sponsorships, no gifted products, just the formula evidence and the price comparison that the industry hopes you never put side by side. The next fragrance has a name so straightforward, it sounds almost clinical. But the aromatic profile inside the bottle is anything but clinical, and the accord it uses has a documented similarity to a fragrance that costs 23 times its price. Number 8. Kayali Vanilla, 28, travel size. Kayali was founded by Mona Katan, sister of Huda Katan of Huda Beauty. The brand launched with a specific and credible founding argument that vanilla in fragrance has been simplified, flattened, and underestimated by the mainstream market for decades, and that a vanilla fragrance built around layered complexity rather than a single-note synthetic vanilla impression could produce something genuinely sophisticated at an accessible price. Vanilla 28 delivers that argument in a bottle. The vanilla accord uses multiple vanilla-adjacent molecules stacked in a way that produces depth rather than sweetness alone. Benzyl benzoate for warmth, tonka bean for the sweet, slightly nutty coumarin note that vanilla-centric fragrances use to add dimension, sandalwood in the base to add creaminess and longevity, and a musk foundation that allows the vanilla to rest on the skin rather than hovering above it as a surface scent that disappears within 2 hours. The full-size Kayali Vanilla 28 retails at around $40, which places it above the $25 threshold for this list. The travel size, available regularly at retailers including Sephora Clearance and TJ Maxx, runs between $14 and $22 for a genuinely usable quantity. At that price, with this accord complexity and this longevity, the travel size is the purchase that makes sense before committing to the full bottle. The next fragrance is from a brand that most people associate with shower gel rather than serious perfumery. That association has been costing fragrance lovers money for years. Because what this brand does with aromatic fougere construction at its price point has no business being available for under $15. Number 7. Adidas Moves for her Adidas is not a fragrance brand. That is the association that keeps most shoppers from pausing at the Adidas fragrance section in any pharmacy or discount retailer. And it is the association that the brand has turned into an extraordinary value by producing a fougere construction for women that the mainstream fragrance market charges 4 to 8 times more to approximate. Moves for her uses a classic fougere structure. Aromatic top notes, opening into a lavender and floral heart with a mossy, woody base. That structure is the foundation of some of the most respected fragrances in the professional perfumery canon. Built correctly, it produces a fragrance that wears cleanly, projects confidently, and develops distinctly on the skin over hours of wear. Adidas builds it correctly, not because the brand invested deeply in its fragrance prestige positioning, but because the brand contracted competent fragrance houses to produce the formulation and then price the result honestly rather than attaching a lifestyle premium to a fragrance bottle. The result is a fragrance that fragrance community reviewers consistently describe as punching significantly above its price point in terms of accord quality, projection, and dry down development. At $7 to $12 for a full-size bottle, Moves for Her is the most underrated fougere available at any accessible price in the current fragrance market. The next entry on this list is the fragrance that the dupe community built an entire conversation around, because the similarity between this fragrance and a specific luxury house offering is documented enough that the comparison has become one of the most cited examples of accessible fragrance over-delivering relative to its price point in fragrance community history. Number 6. Zara Gardenia, White Collection. The Zara White Collection is the fragrance range that the professional fragrance community started discussing seriously when independent reviewers began posting side-by-side comparisons with luxury house releases. Gardenia specifically drew comparisons to Frederic Malle's Carnal Flower, a fragrance retailing at over $350 per bottle. The comparison is not a claim that the two fragrances are identical. It is the observation that the Gardenia soliflore accord, the single flower concentration that Carnal Flower built its reputation around, appears in Zara Gardenia at a quality and concentration that the accessible fragrance market has no logical reason to be offering at this price. Gardenia as a fragrance material is challenging. The flower does not yield essential oil through conventional extraction methods. Perfumers reconstruct the Gardenia accord synthetically using a combination of aromatic molecules, including methyl linalool, ylang ylang, tuberose, and white musks. Doing that reconstruction with enough fidelity to produce a genuinely credible Gardenia soliflore, rather than a generic white floral, requires formulation skill and molecular investment that most accessible fragrances do not apply to their floral category. Zara Gardenia applies it. The white musk dry down has a creaminess and longevity that the fragrance community specifically notes as above what the $20 price point should be capable of producing. At $16 to $22 for a full-size bottle, Zara Gardenia is the white floral that makes every luxury Gardenia alternative difficult to justify on formula terms alone. If this list is making you rethink the fragrance aisle you have been walking past, hit the like button right now, because it helps this video reach the fragrance lovers who are still spending $200 on the brand story when the accord is available for $22. The next fragrance is not trying to duplicate anything. It built its own identity. And that identity has attracted a following so loyal that the brand has had to address supply shortages because demand consistently outpaces what the production infrastructure was originally designed to handle. Number 5. Designer Impostors Primo by Parfums de Coeur. Designer Impostors was built around the most transparent marketing premise in fragrance history. It says on the bottle that the fragrance is inspired by a luxury house original. No ambiguity, no coded language. A direct statement that the brand studied a specific luxury fragrance, identified the dominant aromatic accord, and produced a version of that accord at a fraction of the price. That transparency is unusual enough in the fragrance industry to function as a quality signal rather than a liability, because a brand willing to make the direct comparison is a brand confident enough in the performance to survive it. Primo is inspired by Acqua di Gio by Giorgio Armani. Acqua di Gio retails at around $100 to $130 for a standard bottle. It is one of the best-selling masculine-leaning fragrances ever produced. A fresh aquatic accord built around marine notes, bergamot, rosemary, and a woody, slightly earthy base that Armani's perfumers constructed in 1996, and that has not required significant adjustment in over 2 decades. Primo uses the same aquatic freshness architecture, marine top notes, citrus and herbal mid-notes, a musky, woody base that allows the aquatic freshness to rest on a skin-warming foundation rather than disappearing as a surface freshness that lasts 20 minutes and then leaves nothing behind. The performance is not identical to Acqua di Gio. The performance is good enough that the fragrance community consistently recommends it as a functional alternative for daily wear when the $200 plus investment in the original is not the priority. At $8 to $14 for a full-size bottle, the value argument requires no further elaboration. The next fragrance is the one that most people on this list find the most surprising, because the brand is not a fragrance brand. It is a pharmacy brand that people reach for when they have a cold. And yet, what it produces in the Amber Oriental category has fragrance enthusiasts comparing it to offerings from luxury houses that charge $150 for the same accord complexity. Number 4. Schulten Old Spice Original Women's Interpretation. This one requires a moment of explanation before the fragrance argument is made, because Old Spice carries an association so specific and so gendered in the American market that suggesting it as a fragrance option for women feels like a provocation rather than a recommendation. It is a recommendation, and here is why. The original Old Spice formula, which has remained largely unchanged since 1937, uses a spiced amber oriental accord that the professional perfumery world classifies as a classic structure, regardless of the marketing gender it was assigned at launch. Oriental accords built around cinnamon, clove, vanilla, and musks do not belong to a gender. They belong to a fragrance category. The fragrance community has a specific term for fragrances that were originally marketed to one gender and have been adopted by another, because the accord quality transcends the marketing assignment. They are called crossover fragrances. The crossover fragrance conversation is one of the most practically useful discussions in the accessible fragrance world because it consistently reveals that the gender assignment on a fragrance bottle is a retail decision rather than a chemistry decision. The chemistry does not know what gender the marketing team assigned it. It only knows what molecules were combined and what those molecules produced together on skin. Old Spice Original produces something genuinely beautiful on skin, regardless of whose marketing department decided it was for men in 1937. The Old Spice Original Accord represents one of the most historically significant and most technically proficient examples of that category, produced at any price point in the history of commercial perfumery. The top notes use a bergamot and star anise opening that the Oriental category has deployed as a classic entry point for decades. The heart uses cinnamon and carnation with a warmth that the fragrance's original 1930s formulation established, and that subsequent revisions have preserved rather than simplified. The base uses benzoin, cedar, and a musk foundation that the dry down develops on the skin across 8 to 10 hours of genuine wear. 8 to 10 hours, at $9 to $13 for a full-size bottle. For an Oriental Accord with this historical pedigree and this longevity, dismissing it because of the marketing gender assignment is one of the most expensive assumptions a fragrance lover can make. The next fragrance understood something about the rose note in fine fragrance that most perfumers charge a premium to deploy correctly. And it has been deploying it correctly for decades at a price point that makes the premium versions difficult to justify to anyone who has compared the accords side by side. Number 3. Cuba Gold Cuba is a fragrance brand that the mainstream beauty media has never taken seriously. That is the reason the brand's best fragrances remain available at their original price, while everything they were inspired by has continued inflating toward $200 a bottle. Cuba Gold uses a fougere structure with an oriental warmth that the fragrance community compares to Creed Aventus, a fragrance retailing at over $350. That comparison requires clarification. Cuba Gold does not smell identical to Aventus. It shares the pineapple and bergamot opening, the birch and oak moss mid-notes, and the musky, slightly smoky base that the Aventus Accord made famous. At a concentration and quality level that the fragrance community consistently places in the same conversation as fragrances costing 15 to 20 times more. The longevity is the specific variable that most first-time Cuba Gold wearers find the most surprising. 6 to 8 hours of projection on most skin types, not the synthetic musk fade that accessible fragrances typically deliver after the initial opening impression. Genuine development, opening freshness, transitioning into a richer, deeper mid-note phase, and then settling into a warm, persistent base that remains detectable 8 hours after the morning application. At $10 to $16 for a full-size bottle, Cuba Gold is the fragrance that the Creed community recommends as the entry point before committing to the $300 investment, not as a permanent substitute. As the evidence that the accord quality they are drawn to is available at accessible pricing before the brand name is factored into the price. The next fragrance on this list is from a brand that produces one of the most sophisticated rose soliflore accords available at any price point in the accessible fragrance market. And it is available for under $15 at pharmacies that most fragrance enthusiasts walk through every week without pausing at the fragrance section. Number 2. Roses de Chloe, accessible version via Parfums de Coeur. The rose soliflore is one of the most challenging constructions in fine fragrance. A single flower focus that strips away the supporting structure of a complex floral bouquet and requires the rose accord to carry the entire fragrance experience on its own. Done correctly, a rose soliflore produces something intimate, nuanced, and genuinely beautiful. Done incorrectly, it produces something flat, synthetic, and indistinguishable from the rose-scented cleaning products that gave synthetic rose a bad reputation in the first place. The Parfums de Coeur accessible rose soliflore construction, inspired by the Chloe Rose Accord, uses a rose centifolia adjacent molecule stack that the professional perfumery community has examined and found significantly more sophisticated than the price point suggests it should be. Rose centifolia is one of the most expensive natural fragrance materials available. A kilogram of rose centifolia, absolute, can cost over $7,000 on the professional fragrance materials market. Accessible fragrances using synthetic rose reconstruction, rather than natural absolute, are not cutting corners in a meaningful quality sense. They are using the same synthetic aromatic molecules that many luxury houses deploy in their own rose formulations, rather than paying the natural material premium that some, but not all, luxury rose fragrances justify. The difference in the final accord quality depends on the skill of the reconstruction, rather than on the natural versus synthetic sourcing decision. This reconstruction is skilled. The opening uses a dewy, slightly green rose top note that avoids the soapy, synthetic rose signature that less sophisticated reconstructions produce. The heart deepens into a warmer, fuller rose expression with peony and magnolia support notes. The base uses white musk and cedarwood to provide the foundation that allows the rose to project and persist rather than fading into a skin scent within the first hour of wear. At $12 to $20 for a full-size bottle, this rose accord is producing a fragrance experience that the luxury rose soliflore category charges $80 to $200 to approach. The next fragrance earns the top position on this list not through a single impressive accord, through something more difficult to achieve at any price point: versatility. A fragrance that wears beautifully in the morning and in the evening, in summer heat and winter cold, in a professional environment and a social one. And does all of that for under $15 in a formula that has been independently reviewed by the fragrance community as one of the best all-round accessible fragrances available in any channel at any price. Number 1. Burberry Weekend for Women. Discount pharmacy version. Burberry Weekend for Women is not a $25 fragrance at full retail. It retails at approximately $60 to $80 for a standard bottle at department stores and beauty retailers. It arrives on this list because it appears consistently at discount pharmacies, Ross, Marshalls, TJ Maxx, and Overstock beauty outlets at prices between $14 and $24. The formula is identical. The fragrance house that produces it does not create a separate lower concentration or lower quality version for the off-price channel. The same bottle, the same formula, the same concentration arrives at the off-price retail price through overproduction and retail return channels that flow into the discount market rather than into the liquidation bin. And the formula that arrives at $14 at a discount pharmacy is one of the most genuinely sophisticated, accessible fragrances produced in the 1990s that the fine fragrance world has not fully stopped recommending decades after its original launch. Weekend for Women uses a Kuiper-adjacent fresh floral structure that builds from a citrus and green tea, opening into a peach and floral heart before settling into a warm, woody base with vetiver, sandalwood, and a clean musk finish. The Kuiper structure is the most technically demanding construction in fine fragrance. Built correctly, it produces a fragrance with a complexity and a character that wears differently on different skin types and develops distinctly across the wear cycle. The chypre structure was first formally codified by François Coty in 1917 with the launch of Chypre de Coty, a fragrance built around the bergamot, labdanum, and oak moss accord that the structure takes its name from. Every chypre constructed since then is working within the architecture Coty established. The quality of a chypre fragrance is determined by how skillfully the perfumer balances the three foundational elements and how successfully the supporting ingredients add complexity without obscuring the structural bones that make the chypre immediately recognizable to anyone who has worn one long enough to understand the category. Burberry Weekend balances those elements with a skill level that the fragrance community has consistently noted as above what the accessible pricing suggests the formulation budget could support. The longevity at a genuine eau de parfum concentration delivers 6 to 8 hours of development on most skin types. The opening freshness transitions into a heart that a fragrance community reviewer described as the smell of a genuinely good Saturday. Casual without being casual, sophisticated without requiring the vocabulary of sophistication. The kind of fragrance that the person wearing it reaches for again before the bottle is half finished, because the wearing experience consistently delivers more than the price implies it should be capable of delivering. At $14 to $24 at off-price retail. Burberry Weekend for Women is the fragrance that earns the top position on this list specifically because it does not belong at this price. It belongs at $60 to $80. The supply chain put it here instead. And the smart shopper who knows what she is picking up when she finds it at the discount pharmacy is the shopper who buys 2 bottles rather than 1. 10 fragrances. 1 pattern running through all of them. Those checks applied consistently will reorganize your fragrance wardrobe and your fragrance budget more effectively than any perfume review, any influencer recommendation, or any luxury brand campaign ever will. This channel follows the money, not the marketing. Click the next video on the left right now. We are breaking down the exact same comparison for affordable skincare that outperforms its luxury counterparts, and the formulas we found are even harder to argue against than anything on this list.